Guest characters have been raging in fighting games in the modern era with Tekken, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat. All these fighting games are now pivoting towards guest characters being the staple in supporting post-launch content. Now, are they beneficial or is there some bigger problem that nobody talks about? I just want to go and say they do work. Guest characters are fair. They have a huge marketing boost for their games. Casual fans could just jump in, and plus it brings the social media buzz that the games, these fighting games, need to succeed, especially when hyping up their post-launch content. And because of this, they have big DLC sales spikes. And you could see this in Mortal Kombat. You would always love to see your favorite horror movie characters in a fighting game and doing these crazy fatalities, and people love them. But are they really good for fighting games long term? Unfortunately, and as controversial as this may sound, I don't believe that fighting games are good or they're gonna thrive long term when guest characters in abundance are added. And let me explain what I mean by in abundance. You could take a look at characters in games like Tekken and Street Fighter where they have one or two guest characters, and compare that to, say, MK, Mortal Kombat, where they have whole season passes with half the characters being guest characters. I feel like that overshadows original characters that could have been added, especially if you take Mortal Kombat, a franchise with a huge amount of characters that could be in the game. They have a huge roster. Take a look at Armageddon. There are so many characters that could be added in as DLC for representation, but they're overshadowed by characters like Rambo, Joker, etc. And I feel like these legacy fighters get ignored, especially when people really want them to come back and be revitalized in the modern era, especially how lots of 3D era characters get added in like 17 years ago, and then you never see them again. I feel like NetherRealm could easily revitalize them. I don't care if it's characters like Su Hao or Jarek, or characters that you could argue that nobody wants or nobody likes, but this is what this new era is for. This is why modern MK games exist. You could revitalize the characters, repackage them. If people don't like it, find a reason why people don't like it and improve on that. And the second reason why I don't think guest characters are good, and I'm looking at MK specifically because they do it the most. They have a ton of guest characters. I think that it breaks the tone and identity of a game. And this is going back to what I say, don't do it in abundance. When you take a look at Tekken or Street Fighter, they're adding guest characters. Like Tekken has Negan from The Walking Dead, or Negan, however you say it. But he's like one of the only guest characters in that game, and people love him. People thought it was so cool to have Negan in the game. And I feel like that's okay, because Negan in Tekken 7 is just one of 4 guest characters in that game, which means that, the original characters could shine because it's not oversaturated with tons and tons of guests like MK. Same goes for Street Fighter. You had 1 year with Street Fighter 6, I think it was year 2, where they had Mai and Terry from, Fatal Fury. And I believe that you could argue, the same thing. It's a bit hypocritical for me to hate on that, because half the characters releasing in year 2 of Street Fighter are technically guest characters, but I feel like it fits because Fatal Fury always had the same tone and identity as Street Fighter. Now, horror icons in MK, that makes sense because horror icons are brutal and MK is brutal. You would always love to see, Jason Voorhees and, Leatherface or Scream do fatalities. But sometimes it just feels random, especially in Mortal Kombat 1, where the guest characters weren't really following a theme. I know MKX were horror characters. MK11 were 80s action heroes with, Rambo, Terminator, RoboCop. And it felt like MK1 was more random, You had Peacemaker from DC. You had Homelander, Omni-Man. You could say it was, a little bit of superhero themed. But then you have people like Terminator and Conan and who was the other one? Ghostface. But it just felt random. And I remember at one point, MK1's competitive meta was Homelander. Homelander was top 1. And every time you searched up, esports or tournaments of Mortal Kombat 1, you would see Homelander Farah. I remember that. I'm not sure if it's the same right now, but that's how it was before. Now I feel like that immediately breaks the competitive or just the identity of Mortal Kombat 1, because you're not even seeing a Mortal Kombat character when you're looking up pros play the game. You're seeing Homelander. So I feel these guest characters are just temporary characters to build temporary hype to sell a season pass. And they don't build the franchise long-term identity. You're not going to see Jason, Freddy Krueger, or Terminator come back in a next Mortal Kombat game. They're just temporarily there to sell the season pass for whatever game they're in, and then that's it. They're cool in the moment, but they don't build long-term identity. Another thing is these guests support the developer's greedy monetization strategy, because they could get, say, a guest character from a bigger IP. That equals a bigger pricing leverage. If they're gonna get an important guest character that everybody knows and loves, they could price it higher than usual. And we always have to remember, guests are often paid DLC. I believe that the only one that wasn't paid DLC was Akuma being in Tekken 7's main roster, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the only one that I remember being free, and all the other ones are paid. And this becomes predictable business strategy. We must ask, are we getting these guests because they're fit for the game, or just because they sell? Honestly, I believe that we only get these guests because they sell their season pass. People are going to want to buy Combat Pack 1 if Homelander's in it, but if it's just, a bunch of MK characters, then it might not be as appealing, or it might not have that viral, capabilities of a regular original Mortal Kombat roster. But I believe that that's when they need to pivot and make something better, instead of leaning too heavily on guests. One or two are fine, but when you make half the DLC guests, then I believe that we have an issue. I think guest characters could work when they're not one-sided, when they match the tone of the game, when they feel integrated, and when they respect, the gameplay balance. MKX did this perfectly. MKX was a dark and gritty game, but then who did we have for guests? We had Jason, Leatherface, Alien, Predator. Those are horror characters, and horror characters that match the vibe of the game. When you have guest characters that don't match the vibe, then it feels wrong. It feels like they're just trying to get you to buy them to help sell the game. Now that's my thoughts on guest characters. Overall, I think that they could be beneficial to a certain game's lifespan, and it could help build hype around that game, but you just gotta do it right. I don't think guest characters are the problem in games. I believe that over-relying on them might be. And that's just what I think of guest characters. Let me know what you guys think down below, and what other content I should post, leaning towards more gaming and gaming news and gaming everything, not just, FGC stuff. But yeah, MrFrostyFlamez out.